First off, before getting started, thank you everybody for coming out. I really appreciate it. Hopefully you learned a thing or two, and of course, if you like what you hear, come out and talk to me a little bit after. So, of course, my name is Austin McCulloh, and I am the founder and principal consultant of Austin McCulloh Advising. This is a consulting firm that helps both individuals with success mentality and then works with businesses for business development. So a little bit about me, I'll start back in 2013. As you guys can all tell, I'm a young consultant, and so I wanted to tell you a little bit about myself so that you can learn more. So going back to 2013, I was a high school athlete who, just to be completely transparent, I was not focused on academics in the slightest. And I bring that up because when you're doing that, you're someone who's falling behind the curve. And now, of course, that's something that isn't good to hear from a consultant, but trust me, it all makes sense in a bit. So fast forward to 2016, and I was a sophomore in college. Had just finished up at Iowa Central Community College as a football athlete, and there I tore my ACL a second time. I was someone who I was, like, once again, all focused on athletics, not on academia, and with that, I was still behind the curve. So it wasn't just through middle school, it wasn't just through high school, it was all the way up until my sophomore year in college. Now, when I did this, it was kind of like an identity shift, you know? Being someone who, like, of course, I was small as a football player, but I was always very hardworking, so I compensated. But when tearing the ACL, I figured that, you know, this is hard on my body. It's probably good time to be done with athletics, and so I had to shift and find what I was really meant for. So I did a tax internship at Transamerica, and when I was there, I realized that I didn't know the difference between equity and debt. And if you're someone going to school for finance, that's a pretty glaring issue. Now, when pursuing that, you know, that looks like I was in a really bad situation, but I turned it for the better. You know, through the combination of reading books such as Think and Grow Rich, talking with many individuals, I started to realize what was out there. You know, I didn't have parents who worked on Wall Street. I didn't have parents who were these big CEOs of businesses, but I did realize that there are many people who go from not coming from the most successfully business background to making something for themselves. And so this is when, like I said, go to 2017, I started to realize how much I could do on a daily basis. And that's why I'm in a good position now, is because I got hyper-focused on the day-to-day to get myself into a good position. And this led me to be an executive and entrepreneur by the age of 20 by starting my own online hiring agency, which is still operating successfully and profitably. So once again, we deal with two main services, working with individuals and working with small businesses. The one that I like to focus on the most is accelerating career advancement with individuals by working on things such as helping them go from thinking to executing. You know, a lot of success in life, as I'm sure we all know, is not this super complex equation. People often overthink it because of, like what Kieran and I were talking about earlier today, is that a lot of people don't have the right leaders in their life, and I'll get to that here in a second. As well as helping people go from thinking to executing, I help them with brand development. You know, we live in a global marketplace today, and so we're not just competing with every single person in this room. We're also competing with people in China, in Germany, Australia, etc. And so when there's more competition, you need to figure out ways to set yourself apart. And in order to do that, you want to come off as professional as possible. Another aspect of what I really like to help individuals with, because this translates to every single aspect of your life, even being a parent, although I'm not a parent, I should clarify that, is leadership development. Leadership development is something that makes a massive difference. You know, we have, once again, like I said, we have a lot of bosses in this world, but we don't have enough leaders. A lot of people can say, go do this, go do that, and just tell people to do things, but not many people are leaders who will actually lead from the front and help guide people forward. And then another aspect, because I've done it myself, is helping people start their own businesses. Now, on the business development side, I help businesses improve their bottom line through enhancing employee productivity, which often comes back to leadership development. So bringing in the employees, bringing in the leaders, and getting more cohesiveness, because there's often a lot of friction. So I wanted to go through some of the benefits, because of course there are a lot of consultants out there, so you want to actually dive into the specific person and figure out what sets them apart. Of course, bringing in an outside perspective rather than having internal consultants. And the one that I like to hit on the most is the relatability. You know, that's something that as a consultant is actually very important. I've been an individual who, my entire life, of course, I was always very mature, Now I put a lot of that focus towards athletics, but I was always very mature, so I was always able to relate to people who were much older than I was. Now at the same time, as a 23-year-old, I can also understand today's marketplace and the younger generation, and so I'm a good connector between the two groups. Also, another thing that really stands out to me is I grew up, especially when things started to click for me and I really wanted to start to learn, I love listening to Tony Robbins. Now, Tony Robbins knows a massive amount, but it's actually advantageous to get insights from someone who's closer to your path of success rather than someone who's 20 steps ahead, so someone who's 2 to 3 rather than 20, because they understand in that marketplace exactly what you're going through. Tony Robbins has resources that I don't have that he could say, okay, connect with this person or go make that purchase. And while that's great and while he can provide many great insights, and I appreciate him immensely, it's important to work with someone who's a little bit less removed from your situation. We could talk about that a little bit later, but I wanted to end on telling you about our mission, values, and vision. So our mission is to help individuals and businesses realize their full potential so they can strive towards ultimate fulfillment. I know that's very vague, but what I mean by that is many people live very unfulfilled lives. You know, a lot of people are unhappy, they're working jobs that they don't want to, they're living lives that they don't want to, and it's because they don't realize what they're capable of. Many people just stay in situations that they don't like because they don't see what more that they can do. For our vision, we're striving to become the #1 human capital consulting firm in the world and positively impact every single person in the world. And I know, once again, that's a far-stretched goal, but you know, it's out there. So why not shoot for it? And then another thing, I won't touch on each value specifically, but I do want to touch on passion. You know, that's something that passionate people really make a huge difference, and those are who the types of people are that I want to actually work with. You know. A lot of passionate people are often sometimes called weird, but that's okay, you know. Sometimes normal is a little bit boring, and a lot of those people don't exactly set themselves apart, so I just love passionate people. And with that being said, again, I am the principal consultant and founder of Austin McCulloh Advising. If any of you have any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, thank you all for coming out.
What's your target customer? Like, what kind of individual do you typically work with? Like younger individuals, older individuals? Is there someone in particular?
At least currently, younger individuals, but pretty much anyone who's looking to start their own business and has never done it before. Also, once again, I know this is a term that's thrown around pretty often, but someone who's actually receptive. Because one thing that I've noticed is a lot of people, I mean, even myself, everybody can use more help, but if you're not receptive and open to that, then it doesn't really matter what the advice is. But does that answer your question?
Yeah. How are you reaching those people?
Been using LinkedIn a lot, a little bit of Instagram. Not going to lie, lead generation has not been my sweet spot, but we're learning it along the way, as well as working with PR firms. That's another, when I said kind of having that professional brand, that helps you as well, because if you have that and you're connecting with people and you impress them, you don't know who they know. And so they might be having a conversation with another individual, and of course I'm not sure what's going on there, but for direct outreach, primarily LinkedIn. Mm-hmm. Yeah?
So what other books have you read?
Oh
that
my.
you enjoyed?
Well, Think and Grow Rich is my second favorite. I love that book. But one that I haven't read yet, but I'm really excited to read is The Slight Edge, The Compound Effect. The 4 Agreements was actually a really good book, if anybody's read that one as well. What were some of the other top ones? Actually, I'm blanking right now. If I'm being completely transparent, as you can tell, I'm a talkative person. My whole life, I've only read like 30 books, which a lot of those were within the past few years. But I love to consume my content through podcasts. Like I said, I've listened to probably every single one of Tony Robbins' podcasts over the past couple of years. Ed Milet, listen to his daily. But reading's a good thing for you, but it's still trying to grow in that aspect. Yeah.
Just to expound on that, as someone that was in a leadership position in her 20s and then had babies in my 30s, the best leadership books I ever read were actually parenting books. And I thought that I'd be much more effective if I would have read those. I read leadership books and things of that sort, but it's fascinating
absolutely. If you have any suggestions, please send them my way. Perfect, thank you.
So who is your coach?
Who's mine? Do you actually know Dave Meltzer? Have you heard that name
I've
before?
heard the name.
You'd probably recognize his face. I get that response a lot, but I work with him. And then also, one thing for anybody who has read Think and Grow Rich is having a mastermind group. That's another thing, is because coaches need coaches. Everybody needs more help, and so I surround myself with other individuals. Currently, it's about 4 of them. But they're young go-getters. I'd be more than happy to get around more people who want to get after it, especially the older group, so that it's more diverse. But does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, what are you trying to say?
Yeah.
What's your pricing structure?
My pricing structure, that's something that I charge hourly currently, but I'm trying to figure out packages to put together. Of course, the business is only a couple months old, so I'm still trying to discover all of that. But I'd be more than happy to discuss that in depth with you after. Yeah?
How do you think you're going to overcome the fear of, each of your,
Yeah.
23 years old?
Yeah.
Sort of the lived experience is not very much.
Yeah.
Yeah, how do you think you're going to overcome that?
Mhm.
You're contacting her, the mom, own vision, and everything they want also experience.
Yes. So with that, I can't remember if I mentioned it before or not, but I truly do believe it's actually an advantage as a 23-year-old rather than, now of course in certain aspects. But with the individual success, I don't think the age comes into play there. That's something where the way I put it is I don't know anybody who's worked as hard on a daily basis at self-improvement as I have over the past couple of years. Even I think Kieran could testify to that, because I wasn't a hard worker in high school. We went to high school together. I think I should point that out. So if you guys have any questions, ask him, not me. Now, to answer your question, like I said, especially with a lot of younger individuals entering today's marketplace, and today's marketplace being much different than 60, 70-year-olds when they were starting out, it's something where sometimes there's a cultural disconnect. Actually, I had a call with someone the other day who was very displeased with the upper level management. And of course, I'm not going to disclose which company, but it's something there where, what's the Dow at now? About 30,000? I truly believe the Dow could be ridiculously higher, 300,000 if companies were actually productive. But for example, I was in another company here in Iowa City. I was in their office for 40 minutes at one point a month ago, and for half the time, the workers were talking about one of their homes, meaning nothing work related. So coming in and actually trying to figure out the productivity there. And I think that's something where a lot of that comes down to communication. Of course, with age comes more experience, but one thing that I pride myself on is being a very good communicator, which isn't just talking, it's being able to listen and think that through, and then being non-judgmental with the people. And so asking them why this is happening, asking this side why that's happening, and creating more cohesiveness by simply just opening up the playing field. Does that make sense? I know that was pretty vague.
No, I said, the only thing is that on the other side, you find the barrier is there,
Mhm.
more we count that, and have a choice,
Mhm.
or, what I mean, so it's the initial, and actually the contact, and everything is there,
Mhm.
but
Yes.
it's the first contact.
And with that, one thing that was a good idea by another mentor of mine was to try a free consultation up front, so I can show a roadmap going forward. Because I do understand that. I'm not ignorant to the fact that I'm 23, and I make that very clear and apparent. But just coming in, and because when you're confident in your abilities, you will offer up that free consultation because you know that you can provide the value. Because then you just prove yourself, and then you get the deal after. So.
So like I mentioned before, this is the third time you've joined us to present. So you can consider yourself maybe a serial entrepreneur or a serial starter of things at this point. What have you learned from your other two things you presented, your other two businesses, and how you're folding that into businesses?
Yeah, so 2 points there. So the two that I've spoke at before, one is for my online hiring agency, Supercorn Tutoring. that's taught me how to run a business, and I can dive into that in a bit here. The second one was the personal investment, which was an application that I actually wanted to be a separate idea from this, but that's an application that I'm still in the process of creating, which I believe would actually fit into my consulting brand. So to answer that question, and also for anybody who has started and ran their own business, you can't teach experience, and it's something where I realized through, like, for example, one day I had to be up to teach for my business at 4:30 in the morning, and a tutor had an issue at 12 o'clock the night before. You know, that's something that in a class that I don't think they could legally expect you to fit to those circumstances. But that's something that, going back to leadership, if your people need your help, then you help your people. Of course, you can't do that over the long term, and that's unsustainable to do after day after day after day. But just by starting that business, the online hiring agency, working with China, understanding what the real business world is like, that's just given me a lot of experience that traditional college would not have taught me in class. Yeah.
I had an online business, and I found myself in the very beginning teaching myself everything and saying, I need a millennial. Do you use that ability to market yourself? Because it would counter some of the lack of experience for people my age and older to be able to come to someone who understands what Instagram is and what market it hits and how to function in it. I look at that thing and I'm like, this does nothing for me. So it's really hard for me to be able to market that way.
Sure.
Is that
I haven't as much, but I'd love to talk to you after and learn a little bit more to
okay?
figure
I
out
think there
this.
are a lot of people over 40 who would really benefit from having a comprehensive understanding of social media, because we don't care. Like, at least I don't.
Well, that's perfect though, because yeah, you're right. That's a huge market that they could be potentially missing out on. That's even something where TikTok, whoever's heard of that, that's something I haven't even started using because that's not my style. But I do recognize that's a younger audience who will eventually be entering the workforce, who will be very influential in the future. So you can't completely close that out. So absolutely, we'll talk after a little bit. Yeah.
I'm just curious, what are you struggling with right now? Or like, what is your biggest struggle right now in your business?
Lead generation, proving myself, just because it's one of those things where when I have the conversation with people, they know what I'm like, but I'd lie if I'd said I was the best person who could take 5 or 10 minutes and show my effectiveness right away. It's something that I need to figure out how to condense that a little bit more. Yeah.
So this is your brand. What is your 30-second brand pitch for you?
Ooh.
What is it that, who's on?
I'll filter out the swear words a little bit. Just driven and passionate. You know, that's something like, the last thing I'm ever going to say to anybody is that I'm super smart, because I'm really not. I actually did not get into the Tippy College of Business, so if that shows you anything. But you don't have to be, you know, like I was telling Kieran as well. I had an academic advisor tell me I couldn't go work on Wall Street because my math skills weren't good enough. And that's part of why I love this, and I love consulting and being someone who actually cares about people, is rather than push people down, you bring them up. You know, like if you actually know anything about Wall Street, you know that there are a lot of roles that aren't quantitative. There are a lot of client-facing roles where math is not that important. But I just, see, it's long right there, but do you see where I'm coming from? Yeah, yeah, so.
Where do you see yourself in the next year or 2 years?
Location or with the business?
Anything.
Running this business full-time. Before the end of 2020, I want to have 2 other consultants hired on. That's something that would be a little bit interesting, because of course I've hired for independent contractors with tutors, but not full-on employees, so that's another learning curve to get over, but that's easy. Having this business already impacting hundreds of thousands within the next couple of years, but it's absolutely doable. Yeah.
So what failure have you learned most from so far?
With this business or the other ones?
Anything?
You can't really change people. if they're receptive, you can over time, but especially if somebody doesn't want to change, you're not going to get them to change. So you could, like, for example, I closed a deal with a client that I negotiated the price down for, and I tried to make it good for them just because they came from a certain situation. And the person just changed their mind. They said they couldn't make it work because not everybody's going to think long term. Not everybody is going to see an investment in themselves as an investment. They look at it as a cost. And so rather than just trying to change people, change the people who you're around, meaning get around different people.
That's a good one.
Thanks.
So on the flip side of that, what's been your biggest success so far in this business?
Especially with it being a new business, I have about 9 clients already, so that's off to a good start. Of course, it's somewhere where I want it to be, but just the fact of gaining the confidence to do this. So another portion is, while I have the online hiring agency, and I still run that business, the coronavirus was a little interesting for that, in China. But I knew after graduating from the University of Iowa, I still didn't have that full fulfillment. I love self-improvement just because I know how much it can change your life. Because when you really raise your self-awareness and recognize what you're capable of, like I said, your life is much more fulfilling. So I'm proud of myself just for actually starting this business because I know it will positively impact a lot of people. So I'm excited about that.
If there are no other questions, I can ask our traditional final question. What can we as a community do to help you?
If anybody knows lead generation, like I mentioned before, please do not hesitate to reach out. Also, always looking for clients to get on board. I know I can be of tremendous value, or so yourself, or if you know of anyone, please let me know. I'm always willing to work with kind of referrals and negotiated terms so that if you do refer someone my way, I want to make it beneficial to you. But yeah, if I love to help others and help them see what they're capable of, so don't hesitate to reach out.
All right, you gonna stick around a little bit after?
I will be. I will. Thank you all. I appreciate it.
That's great.